to be heard in. And he brought up a great point. The Marquee Theatre in London is only 400 capacity. That's it. One of the most famous clubs in the world has a capacity of 400. And he got so excited during this interview talking about the very first show he ever saw was Guns N' Roses' very first show at the Marquee in like 1988. He got to be there as a fan. And he talked about how intimate and personal it was. And he could feel the power and the energy. And now he likes to give back by playing at those venues as well. So, yeah, that does suck. But, the economics have changed. Because a lot of these bands that you and I talk about all the time can't afford to go out on tour, right. They're not filling up these venues 5 nights a week. They're only playing, the weekends usually is when they're getting booked. And they simply don't have the money to fight these neighborhood committees. So, and to your point, look, fucknut, you moved right next door to Reggie's or wherever you're at. In fact, the Double Door in Chicago just had just last year they had a legal battle.
Sure.
With the community as a whole, and they finally won. But it looked for a long time like they were going to have to close or relocate. And if you've never been to the Double Door, it's at a perfect location in Chicago. So, yeah, it's really sad. Unfortunately, you're right. It's a trend that's not only in the UK. I think it's all over the country. And, it's just another disturbing trend in the music industry.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Blaze because, the next story I was going to actually talk about, we're talking Iron Maiden. Blaze has a new album out, which we're about to review here very, very shortly, so be on the lookout for that. But, his new album that he just released, interview with Blaze recently, and of course, when you talk about Blaze Bayley, you talk about, obviously, him being part of Iron Maiden. And what's interesting about that is I've gotten a chance to go back and really listen to Blaze, and I think a lot of Iron Maiden fans did the same. And is that they go back, they listen to the Blaze Bayley stuff now and just kind of remove themselves of, he's not Bruce Dickinson, and just listen to it. And unfortunately for Blaze, I really think, this is just me personally, that Iron Maiden's creativity level there was just bad. The songwriting wasn't that good. But unfortunately, Blaze took a lot of the rep for 2 half-assed, in my opinion, Iron Maiden albums being released with the X Factor and with Future Real. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of that feedback has been. But when you go back, 15, 20 years later and you listen to songs like The Sign of the Cross, and you listen to Man on the Edge, and you listen to The Klansman, and you listen to Future Real, and you listen to a handful of songs off of the album, by the way, sorry, not Future Real, Virtual XI, Virtual 11, whatever you want to call it, the second album and the second and last album that Blaze was on. It's just interesting to see that Blaze as a solo artist is making some really good stuff. And now people who are fans of Iron Maiden finally are going back and listening to the Blaze era Maiden stuff now that they're removed from it from quite some time and going, hey, that was actually pretty good. Well, no shit. The only problem is that Bruce wasn't singing it, so you immediately thought it sucked. And when you see Blaze now and you see him as an independent artist, he was just in an interview recently where said he doesn't, with Infinite Entanglement and with his, most recent album that he released with Endure and Survive, that you have those albums that he doesn't leak anything to the media. He is you talk about somebody who's completely an independent artist. It's Blaze Bayley. He doesn't have a team. He doesn't have anybody. It is him, and he doesn't even have a band. Technically, it is just him being a one-man project and a one-man label and a one-man everything. It's just really interesting, and yet the guy continues to make great music, and it's a really, really interesting interview. Go ahead and check it out. I'm not probably doing it justice. But Blabbermouth had it about a week ago or so where, it's just Blaze talking, and Blaze hasn't aged well. He looks a little rough, but the guy can still sing his ass off, and I'll tell you what, his solo stuff, if you haven't checked it out, you're missing out. And if for some reason you've written off his Maiden-era stuff, It's not great. There's The Angel and the Gambler and some other really shitty tracks that they did during that time. But there's some really good ones, too, that most people don't even consider as some of the great Maiden songs because, well, Bruce didn't sing it, and that sucks.
Well, and you know, as a side note to that, first of all, Bruce is kind of doing that as well because he hit the nuclear option on what they were going to play live by essentially saying, I'm not going to play shit you guys did while I was gone. And the other part to that is, you know, when Blaze was with the band and from, I believe it was 91 to 94? Is that about right?
I'd have to go back and check. No, I think it was longer than that. But
it was only 2 albums.
It was only 2 albums, but I mean, Maiden takes a while to release it. And in fairness to Bruce, to your comment, I mean, I know for a fact they've done The Klansman, they've done Future Real, and they've done Sign of the Cross. I know Bruce has actually performed all 3 of those live.
Okay. All right. Well, I stand corrected. Well, but the other thing is, too, whatever those years were, they were right when music completely changed over to grunge and all that as well.
True.
So you had people who were turning their back on metal as a whole.
Great point. Because that's exactly that time frame. And I can tell you why. My first taste of Iron Maiden was the X Factor album that I got from Columbia House. And I think it was the month after I got like a Spin Doctor CD from Columbia House as well, if you know what I mean. Like, that was just the rotation of shit you got. They kind of lumped it all together into one category. And yeah, metal, I'm not saying it was dead, but it was on life support at that time for sure.
Oh, it sure was, yeah.
Well, that's the news. All tied up in a fun little bow for you. 20 minutes of metal action behind the Metal News Desk. Make sure you check out all the other podcasts where we have news, reviews, interviews, all things metal, including more news coming soon. Thanks for listening.